Hi everybody, I'm Dr. Suzanne Hopf. Thanks for coming along today and listening to my presentation. Today I want to stimulate some thoughtful critical reflection on renovating subjects, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the process of publishing with students. First up, subject renovation. Alright, SPH 516 is a paired research subject within the Masters of Speech Pathology program at Charles Sturt University. The purpose of these paired subjects, SPH 516 and 526, is to meet the AQEF Coursework Masters Level 9 research requirements. 516 has 3 learning outcomes that are here. I think we cover most adjectives in Bloom's taxonomy in these 3, but what it really comes down to is that students need to apply their knowledge of research practices and principles to develop a research question and then to actually complete a research literature review. There's always been constructive alignment between teaching, learning and assessment in this subject. It was actually a beautifully conceived and wonderfully designed subject before my commencement at CSU. As you can see here, there are 5 weeks of online learning modules. Each has an associated tutorial. The assessment tasks are split into 2. There are 3 related assessment items that are spread across the 5 weeks. The Assessment 1 task is a discussion forum submissions, and Assessment Item 2 is the actual literature review process itself. When I first picked this subject up in 2019 at the last minute, before the subject commenced, I ran it without much idea of what it was or why it was even in the course. At the time, 516 was a combined coursework and workplace learning subject, and student feedback for the first year of my teaching was pretty average at 64%. There were lots of comments about not knowing why they were doing any of the assessment tasks and that they didn't seem to be relevant to both the workplace learning and the literature review. The feedback didn't surprise me because I didn't, as I say, have much idea what I was doing at the time or why I was doing it myself. But when I reflected on the subject construction and the student feedback, it was evident that something was amiss. A lot of the feedback actually said that the materials were good, I should say. Dr. Chris Plant had actually done a great job of constructing the Interact 2 site and developing the materials within it. There was minimal further development that I needed to do when I picked up the subject. And interestingly, students also said that the feedback on my tutorials was good. They'd really enjoyed my student-centred approach to learning. The poor subject evaluation survey results seemed to be more about the mismatch of the coursework and the workplace learning content and a real lack of cohesion in the terminology used across the learning content. So I began the subject renovation. In 2020, the workplace learning was removed from 516 and I worked on refocusing and restructuring the content to clearly follow the literature review model by Irwin and colleagues. Pictured here is that model. The other thing I did is simplify the review choice. There's so many different labels for reviews out there. We decided to go with a systematised review as described by Grant and Booth in 2009 because it was really the only type of review that they could do that didn't require more than one person to complete. Now, as I said, teaching, learning and assessment in 516 have always been constructively aligned, and all I did was make this constructive alignment explicit to students through use of this model. The other really key change I made in 2020 was strengthening the collaboration between Tim Eggleston, our library consultant, and students. Tim's made a huge difference to students' ability to set firm foundations for their projects through sound search strategy development and completion. Again, Tim's offer to help had always been on the table for 516 students, but from 2020 I really took the time to sell the benefits of his involvement. One last thing we did in 2020 was change the grading weights. Historically, Assessment Item 1 discussion forum submissions were hurdle tasks marked as satisfactory and unsatisfactory. But students had commented that the 100% loading of the Assessment 2 task put a lot of pressure on them and really undervalued their Assessment 1 contributions, and I had to agree. So in 2020, we made each discussion forum submission worth 5%. This still meant that Assessment 2 was high stakes at 85%, but it seemed to have the desired psychological effect. This is the systematised review paper by Grant and Booth. 2020 subject evaluation was much improved. We scored a whopping 95% positive scores. It seemed like Tim and I had finally had the subject construction and delivery issues sorted, and students felt like the teaching and learning content and delivery adequately supported their successful assessment completion. It's been really exciting seeing students immerse themselves in very diverse subjects. And it's not just been about the students learning. I've learned a lot during this process. I really keep up to date by reading these literature reviews. Here's some of the feedback that we've been receiving more recently. So we're pretty happy. We've still got a bit of work to do though. The materials are looking a bit outdated because of changes in CSU branding. So this year I'll be adding a lick of paint to all of the materials. Moving on to the second aim of this presentation, which was to describe a process of shifting consultation and scholarly collaboration to facilitate research publication. People ask me how I can publish with students who've submitted content for a future publication previously as an assessment. Hopefully this design is going to sort of point that murky ground out a little bit. When I think about the work that I do with students, I can put it into these three boxes. Not always clearly, but usually pretty clearly: input, consultation, or collaboration. So input's really where you're just providing information and the students are digesting it as they do, whether that's in a tutorial, when you're lecturing, or in your online learning materials. Consultation, on the other hand, is less directive and there's less of a power imbalance there. But there's still an assumed expectation that I, as teacher, have an expert problem-solving role to play. So weeks 6 to 14 in 516 involve a lot of consultation as students come to me to talk through their projects, refine their research processes, discuss appropriate tools for critical review, and pass ideas around about thematic analysis. It's a bit of a partial test of reliability. There's always some collaboration in the process of consultation because students bring their own expertise, particularly growing expertise in the subject matter of their literature review. However, prior to submission of assessment item 2, I seek to maintain the role of teacher rather than collaborator so that I can assure that the student submits their work and not our work. After marking's completed and grades are finalised, students who wish to try and turn their papers into publications contact me. And that's when we really shift the balance of this relationship to a more equal and collaborative process. When I consider my role in publication in light of the Vancouver Group authorship recommendations, it's very easy to meet items 2 to 4. My work in the publications involves significant revision of all sections of the paper, most often pretty intensely in the background literature review section at the front end of the paper, and getting the method written up to adhere to PRISMA guidelines. Where things can get a little bit murky is with item number 1. I can easily qualify for the design of the work as this is something prescribed by the subject tasks and they're required to do a systematised review, and I walk them through that process in our tutorials. To date, my decision on whether I've met the remainder of criteria 1 has relied on the frequency of my consultations with students during the data searching, data critique and data analysis stages. If the student has done these later tasks independently without consultation, then I'm not an author and I'm happy to be an acknowledged contributor to the paper. If the student has sought my advice during these stages and we've talked through different ways to proceed, then I would qualify for criteria 1. It's a really tricky process and I'd love to hear others' ideas on how best to navigate the issue of authorship on projects like these. So what's happened so far? Okay, so out of the 2019 cohort, 1 student on the left here, Sky Sewell, now graduated, published her paper on speech pathology services in residential aged care facilities. In 2021, early 2021, Kelly Utley published a paper here with me on the right on service delivery options for adolescents in speech, language and hearing. We do have another paper. I have another paper with Sharon Murray on low-tech alternative and augmentative communication devices used in hospitals. It's been under review for 18 months because we submitted it to a Q1 level journal. But as I say, a review is always better than a rejection. In 2021, I've begun working with 2 more students, and we've also ventured into conference presentations. Sky, Kelly and Sharon have all presented their work at the National Allied Health Conference, and 3 additional students have submitted abstracts for next year's Speech Pathology Australia conference. I think that SPH 516 and our renovation project has achieved multiple aims. We now have a really student-centred learning process in this subject. I think I've effectively grown students' interest in research, and at the same time I've really enhanced my own research supervision skills. And it's been wonderful through these publications and presentations to raise the profile of CSU Master students. I started this presentation with the aim of stimulating critical reflection on subject construction of a literature review subject that needed some renovation. I've concluded, hopefully, showing you how some thoughtful redesign can result in something pretty wonderful, one of which is the chance for scholarly collaboration with students to facilitate research publication. Thanks for listening.